Oh,
Had a long day.
nah, I finally just submitted a paper on stuff we've been working on for like 2 years.
Oh, congratulations. That's great. So, what's next for you? What's your new idea?
I'm thinking of trying out a new project that I've been really hyped up about.
But wait, did you at least document your work so that people in the future can reproduce it?
What? Why would I do that? Documentation doesn't help me get more publications.
What?
Why should we care about reproducibility and replicability, or R&R? Or rather, why don't we care enough about it? We care about it, but it's sort of like an all or nothing type of approach. It takes a lot of effort to build, document, deploy, and distribute a product versus doing nothing. The impacts of R&R on an academic career are lesser than other things like publications or research citations. Software communities are leading this effort, and it might be easier for them with virtual machines and whatnot, replacing the physical aspect of CPS and IoT. But the reality is that every community struggles with this issue. The rewards are unreliable and non-deterministic. Not every research project, like TensorFlow and PyTorch, takes off into popular open source libraries. So what are some communities doing to incentivize R&R? Well, there's the ACM badging system, which awards 3 different types of badges for artifacts. The artifact is available, the artifact is functional, and the artifact is reproducible. This is great, but it mainly benefits the communities over the authors themselves. It de-risks efforts to try and reproduce a paper's artifact, knowing that the artifact had a reproducible badge. So, are there any benefits to the authors? You could argue that the author could put the badge on their CV, but we ask the question, what are badges worth universally? Other efforts include awards, such as the Best Research Artifact Award and Distinguished Research Artifacts, but those aren't widely adapted yet. Some machine learning conferences and communities have now made it mandatory to follow a reproducibility checklist in addition to submitting code. Going back to CPS and IoT, do any of these help CPS and IoT R&R? And we argue that the issue actually lies within the fact that reproducing a physical and environmental aspect is really challenging, and we show this in our case studies. Our first case study is machine learning for wireless signal classification, and there are a couple ways you could generate or collect these signals. The first is through synthetic generation to classify these signals, and this is great for R&R and all, but it's impractical because some of the assumptions you make about these synthetic signals cannot be applied in the real world. And so the other option is to do real-world over-the-air signal captures, but those are fairly problematic as well because there can be some environmental factors such as the fan in an indoor case and the weather in an outdoor case that will affect the reproducibility of that wireless signal. There are other things such as the radios themselves, in which there are hardware imperfections, and so those can also influence the reproducibility of the signal. So in the end, this is really tough in the space with reproducibility because of the physical and environmental aspects of this type of work. Our second case study is environmental monitoring, specifically the monitoring of mangrove trees. And so researchers want to analyze the health of mangrove trees, and how they do it traditionally is they can go to each mangrove tree and go observe them to observe the health. Instead, some researchers are flying a drone over these mangrove trees and taking a lot of images, and they're analyzing the images themselves. And so these images are formed into a data set. And the problem with this is that the data sets are not entirely reproducible. The images between data sets are not entirely the same. And so while these might not be reproducible, we argue that the methods by which these data sets were created are reproducible. And so some folks at UCSD have published a field manual regarding some of the nuances of how this data set was collected, such as the drone altitude and the camera configurations. And so while the data sets themselves might not be reproducible, the methods by which the data sets were curated and analyzed are, and that can be standardized and documented for R&R. As I mentioned earlier, R&R in the CPS and IoT space is sort of like an all or nothing type of scenario. It either takes a lot of work to allow your work to be reproducible or nothing. And so we believe that there should be some incentives in between these two sorts of extremes to incentivize R&R efforts. With that said, we have 6 topics of discussion for what is currently being done and what can be done in the future. The first is artifact badges. The problem with this is that badges provide little benefits to the people that receive those badges in terms of their academic career. And so while there's little benefit now, maybe there will be of more importance in the future, but we don't really know. The second is artifact awards. Just like how there are awards for best papers, maybe there should be awards for best artifacts. And so across disciplines, people might not know about artifact badges, but people always value awards. The third is awards for historic efforts. Just as to how there are awards or rewards for impactful ideas, maybe there should be rewards for impactful artifacts. And the idea behind this is to increase and raise the profile of awards for impactful artifacts such that those artifacts will last into the future. The fourth is a platform track type of paper. It takes a lot of time and effort to allow your work to be reproducible, and maybe the reward for that is in the form of a publication. The idea is to provide some sort of deterministic reward, maybe in the form of a paper. The fifth is the artifact review committee. Faculty are evaluated based on their external service, but what about graduate students? The review committee mainly consists of graduate students, and without any sort of recognition, there's no incentive to kind of return to participate in this committee. So either there needs to be some sort of recognition in the future, or the system needs to change. Lastly is structural incentives. As I mentioned before, it takes a lot of time and effort to allow your work to be reproducible, and maybe there needs to be some sort of funding or support from larger organizations for these efforts. With that said, we hope to spark some sort of discussion of what to do moving forward.
Thanks so much for listening, and we hope we can work together to improve CPS and IoT R&R.